Asia was a complex place at that time. The great Turkic dynasties that had ruled the north of China and Turkestan throughout history had come to an end. The Mongols in the east were experiencing problems of division. Small khanates or regional administrations were almost self-destructing due to the authority struggles they wanted to establish over each other. Unfortunately, neither the Turfan Uyghurs, the Karakhanids, nor the Khwarezm Shahs were able to represent all Turks among the Turkic dynasties in Central Asia. The Uyghurs and the Kyrgyz, on the other hand, squandered the Hun and Gokturk heritage and left the historical homeland of the Turks to the Mongols. About the origin of the Mongols and the reason why they are called Mongols, the following sentences are mentioned in the famous epic of the Turks, the Genghis Khan epic. Oghuz begged them to convert to the true religion. He declared that if they accepted, he would give them Turkestan. In the meantime, Karahan's men were plundering, burning and destroying everywhere. But finally Genghis Khan defeated his rivals. He conquered areas from Talas and Sairam to Bukhara. He drove those who disbelieved in Allah to the east, to Karakorum. They settled on the banks of the Tolga River. They made this place their pastures and winter grounds. These people had to live in a very miserable condition, in hunger, poverty and sorrow in these eastern countries. Therefore, the Oghuz called them Mongol or Muval. Oghuz cursed them to wear dogskin clothes on their backs, not to eat anything other than hunting, and not to return to Turkestan again. After the Uyghurs and the Kyrgyz lost their sovereignty in Central Asia, the Mongolian Beys filled the vacancies left by the Uyghurs and the Kyrgyz. Hence, they started to be called with the title of Khagan, the highest honor in the steppe. The Mongols, who lived with the Turks for hundreds of years, were inferior to the Turks in terms of numbers and culture, and therefore had to be influenced by the Turks willy-nilly, imitated the Turks in terms of both social structure and state organization after the 10th century. It was also not possible for them to follow a different path, because there were two societies and state organizations as the most perfect examples before them. One of them was China and the other was the Turks. Since adopting the Chinese system was against their creation, there was no point in structuring in the Chinese way, considering the geography, means of livelihood, and the peoples they dominated. As such, many things belonging to the Turks were reflected in Mongolian society. In 1160, the Jin dynasty, the ruler of northern China, allied with the Tatars and attacked the Mongols, and defeated the Mongols. The Mongol ruler Kublai Khan was killed. The Mongols dispersed in chaos for a while. One of the insignificant leaders among the miserable and confused Mongols, Yesugei Bahadur, the grandson of Kublai Khan, tried to strengthen the Mongols by forging alliances. According to the legend, one day Yesugei was hunting on the banks of the Onon River when he met a bride from the Merkit tribe who had just married. He fell in love with the woman named Hölin at first sight. Yesugei took his two brothers, kidnapped this bride by force and married her. Since Hölin had no other choice, she accepted Yesugei Bahadur as her new husband. According to Turkish customs and traditions, marriage was sacred and woman was honor. Therefore, looking at a married woman with the wrong eye was a capital offense under the law. However, Mongol customs and traditions did not have such a concept of honor, so a woman could be kidnapped even if she was married. Yesugei Bahadur had a son named Timuchin from this woman. This baby, who would later be named Genghis Khan, was born with a bloodstain on his palm. Shaman soothsayers interpreted this stain to mean that he would shed a lot of blood in the future. When Timuçin was 9 years old, his father Yesugey Bahadur married his son Timuçin to Börte, the daughter of On Khan of Kırayit Khan, a Turkic tribe. But that year Yesugey Bahadur was killed by the Tatars. After his father's death, Timuçin hid from the Tatars until he was 16. When he was 16, he went to the Kırayit Khan On Khan and reminded him that he had married his daughter Börte 7 years earlier. On Khan treated Timuçin well and gave him his daughter in marriage, so Timuçin became On Khan's son-in-law and a prominent figure in the Kırayit Khanate. But around the time of Timuçin's marriage to Börte, the Merkit tribe launched a major attack on the Mongols. In this attack, Timuçin saved his own life and his headquarters, but his newlywed wife Börte was kidnapped by the Merkits. Before Timuçin's birth, his father Yesugey Bahadur had sworn brotherhood with On Khan, the leader of the Kırayit. Timuçin went to his father-in-law On Khan to gain an ally. He told him what had happened to them. On Khan remembered that Timuçin had once been helped by his father. He took Timuçin under his protection. He welcomed him very well and called him his son, promising to reunite the disintegrating Mongol nation. On Khan told Timuçin to visit Kamuka, the chief of the Yunga tribe, and get their support. So Timuçin went to Kamuka with his brothers and explained the situation. Kamuka was outraged at what had been done to Timuçin, as if it were his own honor, and he affirmed that he would obey On Khan's decree, saying, "My heart ached when your bed was empty, and my lungs burned when half of your chest was torn open. Let us avenge ourselves and destroy the Merkits. Let us take our revenge and crush the Merkits. Let's bring back our Lady Börte. Let's enter through their tent chimney and knock down their poles, kill their women and children. Let's destroy their tent and burn it to the ground." These words meant eradicating the Merkits and wiping them out. Thus, Timuçin, who had formed an alliance with the Karayites and Yungas, quickly began preparations to attack the Merkit tribe. Kamuka had arrived at the assembly area with his army 3 days earlier. When the Karayic army under On Khan arrived, the three armies set out to attack the Merkit tribe. They organized a night raid on the Merkit tents. They showed no mercy to anyone they captured, and most of the Merkit were put to the sword that night. As a result of this raid, the Merkit tribes broke down, scattered, and fled along the Selenge River. With this raid, Timuçin also saved his wife Börte. The Merkit people paid a heavy price for Börte's kidnapping. More than 300 Merkits were killed. Women and children were captured. This victory brought Timuçin great fame and prestige. In the following years, Timuçin united the Mongol tribes under a single roof and was given the title of Kagan by the decision of the Kurultai. During this period, the Tatars were attacking and plundering the border regions of China and spreading fear. In 1198, the Jin dynasty in North China asked Timuçin for help against the Tatars. Timuçin hated the Tatars because of their enmity with his ancestors and because they had killed his father, Yesugey Bahadur. Taking advantage of this, he allied with On Khan, and together they marched against the Tatars. The leaders of the Tatars were killed, their lands and camps were plundered. At that time, Kamuka and Timuçin fell out, because some of the commanders under Kamuka had left Kamuka and joined Timuçin. This was very annoying for Kamuka. Tatars, Merkids, Naimans, Oirads, and Taytuts became close to Kamuka and formed an alliance and made Kamuka their leader in 2201 with the title of Gur Khan, the universal leader. Eventually, Kamuka gathered an army from these tribes and attacked Timucin. Timucin was overwhelmed by Kamuka's tactics. His horse was killed by an arrow, and then an arrow hit him in the neck. Timucin's brother Hatyun and 70 soldiers from Timucin's army were captured by Kamuka. Kamuka burned these 70 captives, including Timucin's brother, to death in boiling cauldrons. When Timucin regained his health, he did not react to the news of his brother's death. Within a year, he reorganized his army and grew stronger. He decided to take out his enemies one by one. First of all, he launched a great campaign against the Tatars, who had given the greatest support to Kamuka and had murdered his father in 1202. As a result of this campaign, Timucin captured all the Tatar lands. The members of the Tatar tribes were divided among the other tribes. In the same year, seeing that the Naimans were recovering, Timucin asked Ong Khan for support. Forming an alliance with the Karayites, he embarked on a great campaign against the Naimans, who were also presumably a Turkic tribe. Bayruk Khan, the Naiman ruler, was killed in this campaign. Kamuka was very disturbed by this rapid growth of Timucin. Of course, Ong Khan, the Khan of the Kerayit tribe, who supported him, was not to be denied. The fact that Timucin had attracted a powerful Turkic tribe to his side was, of course, not something that could be ignored at that time. Kamuka went to Ong Khan, and together with Ong Khan's son, managed to incite him against Timucin. Learning of this, Timucin prepared his army for attacks from the Kerayit lands. Just as Timucin expected, the news of the arrival of the Karaites with a large army reached him through spies. Ong Khan had placed Kamuka at the head of the army. Kamuka's army greatly outnumbered Timucin's army. While the majority of Kamuka's army was composed of Turks from the Kerayit and Naiman tribes, Timucin's army was almost entirely composed of Mongols and a small number of Tatars. Against a Turkish army with hundreds of years of experience in warfare, the Mongol armies seemed to have little chance. Without waiting for a moment, Kamuka ordered the 500-man vanguard under his command to attack. Timucin, on the other hand, sent only 50 men against this 500-man vanguard. When the two sides began to clash in the square, Timucin ordered his archers to charge. All the soldiers in the square were destroyed by arrow shots. In this way, Timucin lost only 50 men from his own army and killed 500 from the enemy army. Angered by this, Kamuka ordered the entire army to attack. Timucin ordered the Mongol archers he had deployed in the east and west before the battle to attack. They were showered with arrows from the north, east, and west. At this very moment, the weather suddenly turned dark and it started to rain heavily, accompanied by dark clouds. According to the belief in Gok Tengri, rain and thunder meant the anger of Tengri. Therefore, the Turks were very afraid of thunder. The Turkish soldiers under Kamuka's command were terrified and began to retreat. Since thunder did not have the same meaning in the beliefs of the Mongols as it did in the Turks, Timuçin ordered his army to attack the fleeing Turks. In this way, the Mongols won a great victory. Timuçin had learned a lot from this battle. He was especially impressed by the Turks' devotion to their religion and thought that he could use this to his advantage in the years to come. After the battle, Kamuka and Ong Khan fled to Kamuka's country. Ong Khan was killed on the way by an outpost post. The Mongols were greatly outnumbered by the Turks. Timuçin and his advisors knew very well that they could not succeed unless they took the Turks with them. For the Mongols, who had not achieved a serious political structure until then, it seemed the most consistent way to bring themselves closer to the Turks. As Timuçin's power increased, many prominent commanders came under Timuçin's command. The fact that especially powerful commanders and beys stood behind him increased his self-confidence, and one of them was the Turkic commander Subutai. By saying that he would gather his scattered men and protect you from all kinds of dangers, he gave fear to those who were hostile to Timuçin. For this reason, Subutai's support was extremely important in Timuçin's life. In order to win the Turks over to their side, they began to spread fabricated stories about Timuçin's life. In the anonymous book, The Secret History of the Mongols, almost all the stories about Timuçin, or Genghis Khan, were similar stories that had appeared centuries earlier in the epics and stories of the Turks. In this way, in the eyes of the Turks, Timuçin had become a leader in accordance with the concept of Kut, and even a leader personally appointed by Sky God. Therefore, his army, mostly composed of Turks, was ready to give their lives for him. Many of the Turkic tribes under Kamuka's command fled and became subject to Timuçin. When Timuçin entered the Karayat country and subjugated the Turkic tribes there, he had a large army of Turks. On the other hand, Kamuka gathered an army from Nayman and Merkit tribes and attacked Timuçin again. Timuçin emerged victorious from this battle and captured Kamuka. He wanted to forgive Kamuka and bring him to his side, but when Kamuka refused and asked to be killed without spilling his blood, Timuçin accepted his offer and had all his bones broken and killed him in that way. Thus, the elimination of Ong Khan and Kamuka and Timuçin's unification of the Merkits, Naymans, Karayits, Tatars, and other small tribes under his leadership made him the sole power in the Central Asian steppes. In the spring of 2206, he convened a great assembly near the Ono River, gathering all the tribes that had been united to him. By uniting all the nomadic communities, Timuçin had created a single nation of mostly Turks, which he called his own nation, the Mongol nation. He was now the absolute master of the Mongols under the name Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, who eliminated the Nayman kingdom and subjugated the Tatars, Merkits, Tayuts, Karaites and Kyrgyz to himself, dominated the whole of Mongolia and established a great Mongol empire. In 1206, he gathered all the tribes that had been bound to him and convened a great assembly. Genghis Khan also announced his law called Genghis Law at the assembly. The adulterer would be executed regardless of who he was. Livata, that is, those who had intercourse between men and men, would be executed. No taxes would be levied on Muslims who read the Holy Quran, lawyers, physicians, scholars, and those who devoted themselves to worship and asceticism. All religions would be respected, and no discrimination would be made between any religion. He announced to everyone that it was forbidden to use bad and immoral words, that women would go to war with their men, that unmarried girls would be presented to Genghis Khan at the beginning of each year, that a postal organization would be established, that those who killed a man would be executed in the same way, that the elderly would be respected, and that he had appointed his son Chagatai to enforce the laws. With these laws, Genghis Khan aimed for three things: absolute obedience to Genghis Khan, unification of the nomadic tribes, and merciless punishment of those who committed crimes. Mongol society was unorganized before Genghis Khan. At the 1206 Kurultai, the military and social organization of the state was also organized. Genghis Khan appointed his appointees on merit, not according to tribal hierarchy. The key word was loyalty. In 1206, Genghis Khan formed a guard unit, the Kasiks, which grew to 10 men. It was a great honor to be able to join the monkhood, which trained commanders and administrators for the expanding empire and prioritized loyalty to Genghis Khan. With the help of shamans, he was able to perfectly channel tribal loyalty to him. The Mongol Empire achieved its true formation as a state only with the full participation of the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs, who had settled down and had a brilliant civilization in terms of literature, art and trade, voluntarily joined the Mongols, and the Mongols showed a rapid cultural rise. Since the Mongols were an illiterate nomadic tribe, the Uyghur alphabet was adapted for Mongolian, and Uyghur aristocrats began to occupy important positions in the state. At the time of Genghis Khan, there were three states in today's China: the Xia dynasty, also known as the Tangut Kingdom, around Kansu, the Jin dynasty in the north, and the Song dynasty in the south. Genghis Khan wanted to make a great campaign against the Jin dynasty, the sworn enemy of the Mongols. But the Jin dynasty was a powerful and long-established state. Until then, Genghis Khan had only fought wars with nomadic tribes. He had never besieged a city or defended a fortress. Therefore, instead of attacking the Jin dynasty first, he wanted to test the value of his army by attacking the Tanguts, the weakest of the three states that shared Chinese territory. He also planned that if he dominated the Tanguts, he would control the road to Turkestan and encircle the Jin dynasty, the sworn enemy of the Mongols, from the west. The battle against the Tangut Kingdom, a Tibetan and Buddhist kingdom in the Kansu region, would be Genghis Khan's first campaign against a settled and civilized nation. Genghis Khan prepared his army and moved against the Tangut Kingdom in 1207. The Tanguts, however, preferred to hide behind strong fortifications rather than bring an army against Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan then laid siege to Vulahay, one of the most important cities of the Tanguts. While the majority of his army besieged the city, others plundered the countryside. But the Mongols, perfectly organized to destroy enemy forces in open terrain, were clearly inexperienced in taking fortified positions. Genghis Khan kept thinking about how to capture the fortress and consulted with his commanders. At the end of the long siege, Genghis Khan sent an envoy to the castle to inform them that the siege would be lifted if they surrendered the messenger birds in the city. Surprised by such a trivial condition, the Tanguts immediately complied. They handed over all the birds in the city to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan then had the birds tie pieces of straw to their feet and set them on fire. Frightened and engulfed in flames, the birds began to return to their nests. After a short time, the birds returned to the city by burning and started a fire in the city, and the city suddenly started to burn in flames. Taking advantage of the big fires in the city, the Mongol army was able to easily capture the city by climbing the castles with ladders. Having captured the city of Vulahay in this way, Genghis Khan then laid siege to Chongqing, the capital of the Tanguts. This city was stronger and bigger than Vulahay. Using the captives he captured from the Tanguts, he tried to divert the Huanghe River, which supplied the city with water, and tried to make the city surrender by leaving it without water, but they failed to build a dam that could stop the river. When the river overflowed with autumn rains, the Mongol camp was flooded. Genghis Khan considered lifting the siege. But Mongol soldiers continued to plunder the countryside. Eventually, the Tangut king sent an envoy to Genghis Khan and offered peace. He gave his daughter Chaka to Genghis Khan and asked to be his right-hand man. If the Mongols asked, the Tanguts would send an army, as well as camels, a regular tribute of hunting falcons, wool and silk fabrics. Under these terms, a treaty of subordination was concluded, and the Tangut king, Li Anshi, pledged his allegiance to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan had subjugated the Tanguts, gained experience in capturing cities, partially controlled the road to Turkestan, and pinched his sworn enemy, the Jin dynasty, from the west before the great Jin campaign he had planned for the time being. No one in the Mongol lands had forgotten the torture and humiliation suffered by Genghis Khan's great-grandfather Ambakai Khan at the court in Beijing. Ambakai died while being tortured in Chinese dungeons. So for Genghis Khan, conquering the Jin Empire was a matter of revenge. In 1208, the Jin Emperor Mataku died. Emperor Chonghe succeeded him. As a young man, Genghis Khan fought the Tatars with Ongkhan, but ever since he had united with the Jin, he had been regarded by them as a subject ruler and paid tribute to the Jin dynasty. Now, with both Ong Khan dead and the Jin Emperor Mataku dead, Genghis Khan considered himself freed from allegiance to the Jin dynasty. The new emperor Chonghe sent an envoy to Genghis Khan, asking him both to renew his allegiance and to pay tribute. The custom was for Genghis Khan to kneel before the envoy and pledge his loyalty. But Genghis Khan refused to kneel, saying, "Is a fool like Chonghe worthy of the throne, and should I kneel before him?" and spat at the envoy. When the new emperor Chonghe received this news, he was so angry that he had the Mongol envoys executed. Genghis Khan convened an assembly after this incident. After consultation, the Mongol Empire declared war on the Jin Empire. In March 1211, the Mongols gathered 90 troops for a campaign against the Jin Empire. They left only 20 troops behind to protect their bases in Mongolia. This meant that more than 90% of the Mongol forces were mobilized for the campaign. The Jin Empire had an enormous population and a large army. The army under the emperor consisted of 800 0 infantry and 150 0 cavalry. The Mongols advanced to the Great Wall of China without encountering any force. At that time, the Great Wall of China was guarded by the Ongut Turks on behalf of the Jin Empire. Alakush Tegin, the chief of Ongut, sent an envoy to Genghis Khan and declared his allegiance. Genghis Khan married his daughter Beki to Alakush's son. In this way, the gates of the Great Wall of China were opened for the Mongols. Quickly crossing the Great Wall, the Mongol army split into two. The 30-strong vanguard was led by Jebe and Subutai, while the main army was led by Genghis Khan. While the vanguard advanced on the garrison in Datong, the main army under Genghis Khan marched to the Yaoling Pass. 450,000 soldiers from the Jin army were waiting for the Mongols at the pass. The garrison in Datong was destroyed by Subutai. The fleeing Jin soldiers retreated to the Woishai fortress. Genghis Khan then ordered his son Jebe and Subutai to attack the Woishai fortress. Waiting at the Yaoling Pass, the Jin army held its position for months. Subutai and Jebe also eliminated the garrison at Woishai and executed the commanders. They then joined Genghis Khan's army waiting at the Yaoling Pass. Genghis Khan's army of 90,000 men launched a formidable offensive against the Jin Empire's army of 800,000. After the powerful Mongol pressure, the soldiers of the Jin Empire began to retreat. Genghis Khan sent Subutai and Jebe over the hills towards the Jin soldiers. The Jin soldiers thought it was impossible for horse troops to come over the hills, so they did not take any security measures on that side. But when they saw the Mongol troops charging, they were all shocked. The Mongols started attacking from two sides. Jebe, one of the best Mongol generals, made a false retreat at this time. The Jin soldiers fell into this trap and began to follow the Mongol horsemen. But the Mongols had left a small group as bait and hid in the forests. The Jin soldiers who went after the cornered Mongol soldiers were surrounded by Mongol soldiers coming out of the forests, and all of them were slaughtered. Then JB's soldiers went back to support the main army and saw the Jin army scattering and fleeing. Emperor Chonghe barely escaped with his life in this battle. The Jin army took refuge in the fortresses in and around Beijing, avoiding a pitched battle and choosing to defend themselves in the fortresses. It was such a terrible battle that the ground was littered with corpses. The Taoist monk Shang Sun, who passed through here 9 years later, reported watching the whitened human bones stretching into infinity. In this battle, the Jin army lost 450,000 men. This was the first and greatest victory of the Mongols over the Chinese army. The Mongol armies then split up and began to plunder the countryside and Chinese villages. There was no Jin army to defend against them. They were waiting in their fortresses to defend against the Mongol army. The Mongols then began to lay siege to many fortresses and cities. Those who surrendered were either taken as slaves or brutally slaughtered. But engineers, merchants, doctors, teachers, clergy and administrators were spared and asked to join the Mongol army. Day after day, news of these massacres reached Beijing and spread fear among the Chinese. Meanwhile, in Beijing, a palace drama shook the Jin dynasty. The Jin Emperor Chonghe had been assassinated by an officer named Hu Shahu and replaced by his nephew Wu Tupu. Unfortunately, this new emperor was as impotent as his predecessor. Nevertheless, Genghis Khan had not evolved to sustain a regular siege. Always cautious, he accepted Wu Tupu's peace offer, despite the impatience of his generals. The Jin Empire paid an enormous war indemnity, including gold, silk, 3,000 horses, thousands of young male and female slaves, and the Princess of Georgia for Genghis Khan himself. Genghis Khan and his army retreated to Karakoram with this huge war payment and the spoils of war they had captured. As soon as the Mongols left, the Jin Emperor Wu Tupu, who saw Beijing as too vulnerable to danger, left the capital and went to settle in Kaifengfu. This was a flight. Genghis Khan interpreted this departure as the imminent resumption of the war and took advantage of it to break the armistice himself. He quickly turned his army back and marched again to lay siege to Beijing. When he had previously laid siege to this fortified city, he realized that he could not capture it with his nomadic army of mounted troops. He had therefore recruited Chinese engineers. Using the engineers he had captured from the Chinese, Genghis Khan mapped the city of Beijing and consulted with his commanders to determine how and from which direction to attack the city. The city walls were very large and very thick. Much thought was given to how to capture the fortress, and as a result, Chinese engineers were used to build large siege towers and catapults, and dikes were built in front of the rivers flowing into the city. All entrances and exits to the city were blocked. The Mongol army bombarded the city with catapults for 6 months, waiting for hunger and thirst to set in. The people of Beijing knew well the Mongols' looting of other Chinese cities, so they were terrified. Hunger and thirst eventually struck the city, and the Chinese tried to survive by eating their dead. Genghis Khan had killed so many people and captured so many slaves in the Chinese cities he had previously sacked that just feeding the slaves had become quite a challenge. Genghis Khan decided to turn the situation to his advantage by using these slaves as meat shields. He forced the Chinese captives to push the battle towers, to fight in the front line, and to stand at the gate with battering rams. Thus, after a long wait and a lot of effort, the Mongol army began to storm the city. From their fortresses, Chinese archers unleashed a terrific rain of arrows on the Mongols. Large stones thrown from the catapults used by the Mongols smashed the walls of Beijing. The Chinese were not idle in the face of these catapults, and using advanced techniques they threw fireballs made of flammable materials at the Mongols. The Chinese archers soon lost a great deal of motivation when they realized that the people they were killing with their arrows were their own relatives. Their own brothers and even their own children had been captured by the Mongols. With every arrow they shot, they could hit their own son or brother. Unable to bear this situation any longer, the Chinese archers stopped shooting. Meanwhile, the Mongol soldiers who had climbed the walls and entered through the collapsed walls began to slaughter the Chinese. Finally, the city fell. After this victory, Genghis Khan ordered the ruthless looting of the entire city. The Mongol soldiers left no house untouched, no girl unkidnapped, no valuables stolen, no person unkilled. The atrocities committed by the Mongol army in Beijing, the pieces of corpses rotting on the ground, the fields covered with human bones, the epidemics that broke out from these piles of corpses were observed and written down by the Khwarezm Shah envoy Bahaiddin Raza, who witnessed the events himself. The Mongols had set fire to the entire city with its inhabitants. This ruthless destruction lasted for a month. It was very difficult to transport gold, silver, silk and valuables back to Mongolia. The Jin dynasty was stuck with its new capital Kaifengfu and a city in Shenxi. Genghis Khan realized that it would take a long time to conquer all of China, so he turned his attention to Turkestan, handing over the conquest and administration to one of his generals, Mukuli. After the Mongol conquest of northern China, the Mongol Empire took advantage of all the riches of China and became the richest state of the time. The capitals of the whole world were now closely interested in what was happening in China. The Khwarezm Shah ruler Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah could not believe that China, which he wanted to conquer himself, had fallen into the hands of the Mongols. He sent a delegation led by Sayyid Bahauddin Razi to China to verify the truth of the news. When the Khwarezm Shah envoys arrived at the Chinese frontier, they witnessed this enormous atrocity in person. When Genghis Khan embarked on the Chinese campaign in 2211, he sent all his forces against China. Soldiers from the Naimans and Makids under the control of the Naiman prince, who opposed the Mongol rule, fled westward to the Karakitai. Chalukku accepted them and married his daughter to the Naiman prince. During Genghis Khan's campaign in China, wars broke out between the Khwarezm Shahs and the Karakitais and the Naiman prince, who was the son-in-law of Karakitai Gurhan. He had seized his father-in-law's throne in agreement with the Khwarezmlis. Genghis Khan could not leave his old enemy, the Naiman prince, as the ruler of Karakitai. After capturing Beijing, he sent one of his best commanders, Jebe Noyan, with a force of 20,000 men against the Karakitais. Although the people of the Karakitai state had a complex religious structure, the majority of them were Muslim Turks. The new Karakitai ruler Kuchluk was a Buddhist Turk. He forced the Muslim Turks living in Kashgar and Khotan to convert to Buddhism. Muslims who refused to become Buddhists were tortured. When Jebe entered the Karakitai state with his army, Kukluk left the country. Entering the capital Balasagun, Jebe captured the city without encountering any resistance from the people. As a result of the atrocities committed by Kuchluk against the Muslims saw the Mongols as a savior. In fact, when Jebe entered the city, he was greeted by the Muslims as a favor of Allah. In return, Jebe forbade his army from looting and pillaging in the city. The fleeing Kuchluk was captured and killed by Jebe's soldiers. With this annexation of the Karakitai country to the Mongol Empire, the two superpowers of that period, the Khwarezm Shah Empire and the Mongol Empire, became border neighbors. China's riches had always attracted Muslims throughout history. Just as the Umayyad Caliph Hajjaj bin Yusuf and his governors had long dreamed of conquering China, Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah dreamed of conquering China. However, when he heard that the Mongols had beaten him to it, he sent Sayyid Bahaiddin Razi to Beijing to confirm the news. From there, Al-Raza traveled to Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire, and met with the Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan. During their meeting, Genghis Khan told him that he would welcome the caravans of both sides to travel freely, and that the merchants would be in complete safety within his country. In 218, Genghis Khan sent an embassy delegation of Muslims to Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah. The spokesman of the delegation informed Khwarezm Shah that Genghis Khan considered Khwarezm Shah Alauddin Muhammad as his most beloved son, wanted to be friends with him, and asked him to keep his doors open for the traders of both nations. Khwarezm Shah Alauddin Muhammad said to the delegation, "You know the extent of my country and the size of my armies. How dare your Khan address me as his son?" But Mahmud Yalvas was able to calm him down and conclude a trade agreement between the two states. Genghis subjects attached importance to commercial activities. Trade with settled tribes was always a necessity, and clothing was needed most of all. According to Al-Juwayni, the Mongols at that time had great respect for Muslims. White and clean tents were specially set up for Muslim merchants. Genghis Khan had also placed guards to ensure the safety of the caravans. But even though things seemed to be going well, this was not the case for Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah. For Genghis Khan, a friendly country was a country that was subject to him. All other rulers had to be subject to him. In other words, Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah knew that unless he saw himself as the beloved son of Genghis Khan and was subject to him, he would be the enemy of the Mongols. The army of Alauddin Muhammad, the Sultan of Khwarezm was considerably more numerous and stronger than the Mongols. The Mongol army, on the other hand, although small in number, was a nomadic army, loyal to Genghis Khan to the end, and their only job was to fight. Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah, just like the Seljuks, dreamed of presenting himself as the representative of Islam, declaring jihad against the pagan Mongols, gaining the support of all Muslims, and with these large armies, eliminating the Mongols and advancing all the way to China. However, Sultan Abbas was in great conflict with the Caliph An-Nasir. With the support of the scholars in his country, he obtained a fatwa that An-Nasir was not worthy of the caliphate. He then engaged in a battle to the death with the Caliph of Baghdad. This mortal enmity between the Sultan and the Caliph left the Islamic world divided and powerless in the face of the Mongol invasion. It was in this year that a large Mongolian trade caravan entered the city of Otrar. Inaljik, the Khwarezm governor of Otrar, first had those in the caravan arrested and then executed for spying. When Genghis Khan heard about this, he was extremely angry and sent an embassy delegation to the Sultan and demanded that Inaljik, the governor of Otrar, be handed over to him. However, it was Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah himself who ordered the death of those in the caravan. According to the traveler Ibn Battuta, Genghis Khan did not dare to attack the Khwarezm Shah country because the Khwarezm Shahs were in a strong position. However, he almost lost his patience and fortitude in the face of the Otrar disaster. Genghis Khan then began a great preparation to conquer the Islamic countries. Genghis Khan had about 200,000 soldiers under his command. Although this force was outnumbered by the Khwarezm Shah army, it was disciplined and had a strong staff. Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah, on the other hand, kept his main army in Samarkand and decided to meet the Mongols there, while the rest of his troops were divided and dispersed between the Sirdaria line and the fortified positions of the Mawar-o-Nahir. As a result, the Khwarezm Shah armies, despite their numerical superiority, were outnumbered by the Mongol army because they were divided at certain points. Genghis Khan and his army approached the borders of Khwarezm through the Amu Darya and entered the city of Otrar. This was symbolically very important. When Genghis Khan arrived in front of Otrar, he learned about Muhammad Khwarezm Shah's war plan and decided to prevent the cities in the Blue River from helping each other by organizing his army to enter between the cities. He assigned the Mongols Chagatai and Eugadai to the siege of Otrar. He assigned his eldest son Dwarf to advance to the Siri Darya and lay siege to the city of Jend in order to prevent a counter-attack from their side. Genghis Khan marched on the city of Bukhara with the main army under his command. After ravaging Bukhara, Genghis Khan turned his attention to the capital Samarkand. Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah was in Samarkand with his main army. It was tactically important for Genghis Khan to attack Bukhara first. It interposed itself between the capital and the other cities and prevented the Khwarezm armies from uniting. When Sultan Muhammad Khwarezm Shah saw that his line of retreat had been cut and that the forces he had expected from Khorasan had not arrived, he panicked and left Samarkand with his entourage. Meanwhile, Chagatai and Eugadai had captured the city of Otrar and marched on Samarkand with their forces. When Samarkand was besieged by the Mongols, the Samarkanders, abandoned by their sultan, could hold out against the Mongols for only 5 days. At the end of the 5th day, the city was surrendered to the Mongols. The massacre in Samarkand was so great that only enough people to fill a neighborhood were left alive. In the meantime, Genghis Khan's eldest son Juchi had captured the city of Jend and went south to lay siege to the former capital of the Khwarezm Shahs, Gurgensi. The Khwarezm Shah Sultan Muhammad was unable to take any action against these Mongol invasions and fled first to Bel, then to Nishapur and then to Ray. Genghis Khan assigned Jebe and Subutai to find and kill the Sultan. Seeing Jebe and Subutai approaching, the city of Bel surrendered without any defense. Nishapur surrendered in the same way. On the other hand, when the cities of Tuz, Damgan and Semnan resisted Subutai, these 3 cities were destroyed by the Turkish general Subutai. Subutai then followed in Sultan's footsteps and reached the city of Ray. He quickly captured this city as well, killing the men and capturing the women and children. In the face of this relentless pursuit, the Sultan was exhausted and took refuge on an island in the Caspian Sea. There, exhausted, he died in December 1220. Before his death, he had appointed his son Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah as his successor. Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah had inherited from his father a state that was about to collapse. After the death of Sultan Alauddin Muhammad, Genghis Khan turned his invasions to Afghanistan and Khorasan. Although the city of Balkh surrendered to Subutai, Genghis Khan entered the city and sacked it by Mongol soldiers. Genghis Khan's son Tului captured the city of Merv without a fight, although all the inhabitants were killed. Sitting in a gilded armchair, Tului watched these massacres with glee. Only 400 artisans were spared. The city of Gurgench could only fall when Eugadai came to its aid. Except for the artisans sent to Karakorum, the entire population was put to the sword. Meanwhile, in the Turkish defense of Nishapur, Genghis Khan's son-in-law Tochukar was killed. When Genghis Khan's daughter demanded that not a single soul be left alive in the city, Genghis Khan gave this task to his son Tului. Tului laid a fierce siege to the city of Nishapur. Unable to withstand the Mongol offensive, the city of Nishapur fell. The Mongols massacred everyone, including women and babies. Even cats and dogs were caught and thrown into the fire and burned. Near Tux, the Mongols destroyed the mausoleums of Caliph Harun Rashid and the great Seljuk Sultan Sanjar, and everything that constituted the glory of Turkish Islamic civilization was systematically destroyed by the Mongols. Genghis Khan then turned eastward and laid siege to the city of Talekan. His sons Chagatai, Eugadai and Tului joined Genghis Khan. It was at this time that Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah was able to organize an army of 60,000 men in the city of Ghazna. This army was the only organized army that confronted the Mongols without taking refuge in a fortress during the Mongol invasion. Genghis Khan, who learned that Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah was gathering an army against the Mongols, sent 30,000 soldiers under the command of one of his commanders, Shigi Kutugun, to eliminate this danger. Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah met the incoming Mongol army near Pervan. He knew the Mongols' war tactics well. The Mongols planned to weaken and defeat the Khwarezm Shah army from 4 sides with their mounted archers. On the other hand, Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah had positioned his army in the middle of 2 mountains to prevent the Mongol soldiers from moving around him, and he eliminated this danger by leaning his right and left against the mountains. The Mongols had never lost a battle before. The battle began with an attack by Mongol horse archers. In the face of this attack, Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah ordered the Khwarezm archers to attack. Since the range of Khwarezm's powerful Turkish bows was longer than the range of the Mongols' arrows, the Mongols were showered with arrows before they reached the firing range. Shigi Kutugu withdrew his archers to avoid losing more men. Shigi Kutugu thought that if he came into close contact with the Khwarezmian soldiers, he could easily disperse the Khwarezmian army, so he ordered his soldiers to attack en masse. Mongol horsemen began to advance on the Khwarezm Shahs at full speed. In response, Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah pulled his archers to the ground and ordered arrow fire from the air, while his spearmen moved to the front lines and met the Mongol horsemen with their long spears. When the spear troops, helpless in the face of the powerful Mongol attack, began to melt rapidly, Jalaluddin ordered the entire army to charge. The Khwarezm Shah soldiers rushed at the Mongols with all their might to avenge the years-long Mongol invasion. The Mongols, who had lost their maneuverability due to their narrow space, no longer had a chance to gain the upper hand over the Khwarezm Shahs. The Mongol soldiers, whose numbers dwindled rapidly, began to flee. Thus, the Battle of Parvan ended with the victory of Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah. The rapidly advancing Mongol invasions were stopped for the first time. The Mongols had lost a battle for the first time. When the news spread throughout the Khwarezm Shah country that the Mongols had finally been defeated, the last surviving cities in eastern Iran were emboldened. The people of Herat rose up against the Mongols, killing Mongol soldiers in the city. The surviving Khwarezm Shahs around the city of Merv joined Jalalud al-Din and killed the Mongol governor of Merv. Jalaluddin became a beacon of hope for his people. Upon hearing the news of this defeat, Genghis Khan wanted to deal with the Khwarezm Shah Sultan personally. Genghis Khan assigned one of his generals, Al-Sijide, to retake the revolted city of Herat and Shiki Kutugu to suppress the uprising in Merv. He himself led an army of 50,000 men and pursued Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah turned south and marched towards the Indus River. Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah and Genghis Khan's army came face to face at the Indus River. Jalaluddin secured his army with the Indus River on his right and the steep mountains on his left. Thus he prevented the Mongol army from being surrounded by horse archers. Genghis Khan, on the other hand, was at the rear of the army with his 10,000-strong Junki Guard. Since the myth that the Mongols could not be defeated had been shattered at the Battle of Parwan, the Khwarezm Shah armies were confident. It was the Khwarezm Shah charged trumpets that started the battle. On Jalaluddin's orders, the right-wing forces moved against the Mongols. The Mongol left wing responded to this attack and was overwhelmed by the Khwarezm Shah offensive. Genghis Khan sent reinforcements to the left wing from the center, while Jalaluddin likewise sent reinforcements to help the right wing. The Mongol center and right wing then attacked, breaking the connection between Jalaluddin and his right wing. And divided Khwarezm Shah's army in two. While the Khwarezm Shah right wing was weakened by the encirclement, the Mongol army began to melt and retreat with the successful offensive of the center and left wing under Jalaluddin's command. Genghis Khan was unable to achieve the desired result because of the steep mountains protecting the Khwarezm Shah soldiers. He had to draw the Khwarezm army to him in order to gain victory. Therefore, he ordered his army to retreat. If Jalaluddin won this battle and defeated Genghis Khan, he could save his country and stop the Mongol invasion. Now he had the opportunity he had been waiting for, and the Mongols began to retreat. Jalaluddin ordered his army to attack with the ambition of victory. The Mongols were rapidly melting and retreating, and Jalaluddin was marching to victory step by step. However, as the Khwarezm Shahs repelled the Mongols, a gap opened up between the mountain and the army, and Genghis Khan had the opportunity he had been waiting for. Finally, Genghis Khan ordered the armored Kashik troops in the rear to charge. The Kashiks moved swiftly, and between the mountain and the Khwarezm army, they trapped Jalaluddin's army. What the Mongols had failed to do at the Battle of Parwan, they succeeded this time under the leadership of Genghis Khan. When armored cavalry surrounded the victorious Khwarezm Shahs, the course of the battle changed in an instant. The Khwarezm Shah's left flank began to melt and disintegrate rapidly. Seeing the collapse of the Khwarezm left wing, Genghis Khan ordered his army to attack. By the time Jalaluddin realized what a trap he was being led into, it was too late. The Khwarezm Shah army had dispersed and there was no chance of turning the battle around. Jalaluddin took his guard unit, his mother and his wives and marched towards the Indus River. Genghis Khan used to take the virgins from the women in the captured territories for himself and distribute the other women to his soldiers. When Jalaluddin's mother and his wives wept and cried, "For God's sake, kill us, but do not make us prisoners of the Mongols," he ordered his soldiers to throw them into the river and watched sadly as they drowned in the river. He then entered the river and made it to the opposite shore despite the strong current of the river. Genghis Khan prevented his soldiers from following him and said about Jalaluddin, "The son of such a father is fortunate. He saved himself from two troubles like water and fire and reached the shore." Jalaluddin and his 700 surviving soldiers were eye to eye with the Mongol army across the river. Jalaluddin Khwarezm Shah felt that he had lost not only a battle but his entire legacy. As he and his men turned toward India and out of sight, Genghis Khan sent his soldiers under Belanoyan to capture and kill Jalaluddin. After a 6-month siege, Mongol General Altigidei captured the city of Herat and sacked it for a week, killing all the men and giving the women to his soldiers. The few Muslims who survived in Merv were slaughtered by Shiki Kutugu. the mother of the late Sultan Alauddin Muhammad Khwarezm Shah, was captured and taken to Mongolia. Khwarezm Shah children were killed and 100,000 artisans were taken to Mongolia. With this expedition, the Mongols committed a massacre unprecedented in human history. As a result of this campaign, 9/10 of the country lost their lives or were captured. Al-Juwani wrote that not even 1/10 of the people were left alive at the end of the campaign. Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia in the spring of 2225, leaving behind a huge wreckage. Before departing for the Khwarezm campaign, Genghis Khan called his sons together to determine the heir to the throne in case something happened to him on the campaign. When Jochi and Chagatai began to argue about whether Juchi was the real son of Genghis Khan, at Chagatai's suggestion, he chose his son Eugadai as the heir to the throne. Before going on a campaign against the Khwarezm Shahs, Genghis Khan asked the tribes under his rule to send troops, and everyone except the Tanguts did so. The Tangut king's envoy gave a humiliating reply to Genghis Khan's envoys, saying that if Genghis Khan was so weak, why did he go to so much trouble to become Khan? Genghis Khan was marching on the Khwarezm Shahs at the time and was in no position to take any action to punish the Tanguts, but he would not forget this betrayal and would punish them after the Khwarezm Shah campaign. Finally, after invading the Khwarezm Shah Empire and committing many atrocities, Genghis Khan returned to his capital Karakorum in 1225. As soon as he returned to Karakorum, he began preparations to punish the Tangut king. In 1226, he completed his preparations and marched with his army against the Tangut kingdom. On the way, Genghis Khan fell from his horse and broke his ribs, causing severe pain in his abdomen. While he was resting in his bed, his wife, who was alarmed by his fever, gathered his sons and commanders in the tent to inform them of Genghis Khan's illness. His sons and commanders argued that it would be right to postpone the campaign. But Genghis Khan objected, saying that if we retreated, the Tanguts would think we were afraid. So an envoy was sent to the Tangut kingdom to resolve the issue through diplomacy. The Tangut king replied, "If the Mongols want to fight, let's go toe-to-toe. If they want gold, silver and silk, let them advance to get it." At these words, Genghis Khan, exhausted from a high fever, said that even if I had to die, we could not retreat anymore. Don't let anyone know about my death. Never weep or mourn. That way our enemies will never know anything. Destroy all the Tanguts. These words, they were Genghis Khan's last words. Genghis Khan was then taken to a secret valley in the Lipuan mountains and treated with herbs. Since the year 1219, Genghis Khan felt that death was fast approaching him. He asked all the religious and scholarly men he met about the elixir of immortality, but to no avail. On the other hand, the Mongol army attacked the Tangut country with all its forces. It burned and plundered the region and the people to such an extent that the Tangut kingdom could not even put up any resistance. The Tangut king was killed. Even the graves of rulers were dug up and their bones burned. The Tangut people were massacred by the Mongols down to the last baby. That is why there is no information about the Tanguts in the sources after that. Thus, Genghis Khan's last order was fulfilled. Genghis Khan was 65 years old when he died on August 25, 1227. What happened to Genghis Khan's body and where it was found remains a mystery to this day. There is no record of it in the secret history of the Mongols. Genghis Khan's tomb has still not been found despite all archaeological searches. His son Eugadai, who succeeded Genghis Khan as head of the Mongols, was determined to follow in his father's footsteps and conquer the whole world.